Hi, and welcome to Dopamine and Doubt. I'm your host, Rachel, a licensed clinical social worker specializing in ADHD and OCD. On this show, I will be speaking from both my clinical and lived experience as we explore the surprisingly common crossover of ADHD and OCD. Because when we understand which is in the driver's seat, we are better able to know what we need in that moment. Whether you're living right at the intersection of both or navigate life with one of these neurotypes, you're welcome here. As always, please take what is helpful and leave what isn't. Neurodivergence shows up differently for everyone, and there is no one-size-fits-all approach. Okay, let's dive in. A lot of ADHD advice sounds like common sense. Make a list. Use a calendar, set reminders, break things into steps. But if you have ADHD, knowing what we need to do and consistently doing it are two very different things. Today, I want to talk about ADHD and supporting the areas that ADHD makes harder. Traditional models teach that if it matters, you will remember. And if you care, you will do it. But the ADHD reality is importance does not reliably create access to our executive functioning. Someone can care deeply and know what they should do, and even have done it successfully before, and still struggle because our ADHD brains don't function like a neurotypical brain. The goal of ADHD strategies is not to force our brain to function that way. The goal is to support around the places where ADHD makes things less automatic. ADHD affects our working memory, our task initiation, time perception, prioritization, motivation, and reward regulation, regulating attention, and emotion regulation. Let's break those down a bit, because the problem is not knowledge, but access. Working memory. Working memory is essentially how we hold, process, or manipulate information while we're performing a task. When we have ADHD, that is a lot harder for us, and we need external systems. ADHD treatment often involves moving information out of our brain and into the environment. We need visual cues because out of sight can genuinely become out of mind. An example of this would be a calendar. I have a fridge calendar that I update monthly, and without it, I would forget most things. Because our brain is not a reliable storage system for future intentions. We also might need checklists and reminders because working memory has limits for us. Then there's task initiation. So this is what allows you to begin a task. When we have ADHD, that can be really difficult, but there's many different strategies, such as reducing friction, which means essentially design your environment to support you. Instead of telling yourself, why can't I just do this? Instead, ask, how can I make this easier to start? An example, keeping medication visible. Yes, I would love my medication to be neatly in a cabinet, but then I wouldn't take it. Or putting workout clothes out the night before next to my bed. Still doesn't give a guarantee, but it helps. Or using clear bins for items so I can actually see it. Then there's the evidence-based strategy of body doubling, which is essentially borrowing regulation. Our brains often struggle with activation energy around a boring task or a task without an immediate reward. It's not that we need another person because we can't do it. It's more that our brain performs differently with external structure. This can be a really helpful support when you're having trouble beginning. I use this in my office all the time with folks because sometimes we just need that little bit of extra support to get started. We can also break tasks down, which can reduce that activation energy. It's easy to say, just break it into small steps, but our brain then can get overwhelmed and think we have to make a list of 47 different steps. But the goal is not to make a more detailed plan necessarily. It's lowering how hard it is to get started. So in an example, instead of go clean up the kitchen, try let's put the dishes in the dishwasher. And this first step can create momentum. Then we have differences in motivation and reward regulation. Reward systems can bridge the motivation gap. This is because ADHD brains often have a harder time using delayed reward as motivation. Something being important in the future doesn't always create enough activation in the present. I'm not talking about bribery. I hope everyone just heard my cat sneeze. She's so cute. Okay, stay on task. Rewards are not bribery. Examples could be listen to a podcast while you fold laundry, having coffee after you've completed your paperwork, checking off a visual progress tracker, pairing a boring task with something you enjoy. The goal is to add enough immediate reinforcement that it helps your brain engage with the task that it doesn't naturally provide. We also have attention regulation challenges because attention is not simply, I need to pay attention, but it's more, can I access attention for this task right now? This is why I can hyper-focus on this podcast, but struggle to pay the bill that's still on the counter. Okay, regulating attention. ADHD is not inability to pay attention, but it's difficulty regulating attention. Again, hyperfocus on something of interest, pull towards novelty, difficulty with task switching. The strategy is not to try hard to focus, but change the conditions that help our brain access the direct attention. So this could be strategies such as remove distractions when needed, add stimulation, such as music, podcast, find personal meaning, use timers for transitions, create accountability, make tasks more engaging. We can also struggle with time perception, and we need time to be externalized. It's not something we're failing to manage, but it's just something we need to make visible. So help and, accommodations with this would be visual timers, alarms, calendar blocking, buffer time. Another common struggle is prioritization. It's not that we don't know what to do. It's more that everything feels equally important, or the thing that is most interesting becomes the priority. ADHD can make it harder to rank tasks by importance, shift attention away from something interesting. Ooh, is that hard? Hold long-term consequences in mind. It's really not a lack of priorities, but difficulty sorting them in an appropriate order. And strategies can be choosing your top 1 to 3 out of a list, or asking yourself what the biggest consequence is if it doesn't happen. Separating urgent from important and making external deadlines and structure. Finally, let's talk a little bit about shame. Self-compassion for ADHD and OCD is so important. All the strategies in the world work better when it comes from curiosity rather than criticism. Shame can create a temporary urgency, but it's not a sustainable executive functioning strategy. My hope for this episode is to give you more information about executive functioning and the differences in how our brains work in comparison to a neurotypical brain. And an important thing to point out is the world was not necessarily designed for our brain differences. And there's nothing wrong with us because of that. I hope you'll join me to unpack these topics in future episodes and hopefully with a little more humor. This one was definitely very educational. But I appreciate you being here, and I look forward to sharing more. This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and does not replace professional mental health care. If you are struggling, please reach out to a qualified mental health provider who can work with you directly. What I share here comes from my clinical experience and my own journey, but your situation is unique to you. If you are in crisis, please contact 988 or go to your nearest emergency room. Thanks for being here.